Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. At 4 p.m. on July 19, 1989, countless television camera crews and emergency responders were already waiting at the Joint Military Civilian Airport in Iowa, Sioux Gateway Airport, awaiting an aircraft that had lost control for an emergency landing as the plane slammed heavily onto the ground. The aircraft disintegrated. Two people died. Most of those who survived were injured. But despite this, the captain who flew the plane was still hailed by the public as a hero. This event later became known as the Sioux City Air Crash. So what exactly happened that year? Next, we'll travel back to 1989 to re-examine the details of this air disaster. Denver is the largest city of Colorado, USA. Before the 19th century, Denver was just a sparsely populated area. Later, during the gold rush, large numbers of immigrants and workers flooded in to settle the region. It quickly developed into a major mining town, and in 1858, the city of Denver was established. Located north of Denver, Stapleton International Airport was Denver's most important airport. From 1929 to 1995, it was extremely busy. On July 19, 1989 at 1:10 p.m., passengers taking United Airlines Flight 232, after hearing the boarding announcement, began gathering their belongings and heading to the gate to board. The flight plan for this trip was to take off from Stapleton International Airport in Colorado, stop over at O'Hare International Airport in Illinois to drop off and pick up passengers, and then continue on to Pennsylvania to Philadelphia International Airport. July was during summer vacation, a wonderful time for children. United Airlines was also running several promotions for children. For instance, on this flight, any child under 14 flew for just 1 cent. Therefore, of the 296 people on board, besides 3 flight crew members and 8 flight attendants, there were 52 children. The aircraft for this flight was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, the initial passenger version, the DC-1010. It was a nearly 18-year-old, 3-engine, medium to long-range, wide-body passenger jet. Although its passenger capacity was less than a Boeing 747, its range was relatively longer, and it could operate from smaller airports, using shorter runways. It was Boeing's most potent competitor at the time. The captain of flight was Alfred Al Haynes, 57 years old, who had worked for United Airlines for 33 years and had 29,967 hours of flight experience, with 190 hours on the DC-10. The first officer was William Bill Records, 48 years old, with 20,000 hours of flight experience, 655 of which were on the DC-10. Like Captain Haynes, before flying commercial airliners, both had been fighter pilots in the U.S. military. The flight engineer was Dudley Joseph Dvorak, 51 years old, with 15,000 hours of flight experience, although he only had 3 hours of flight time on the DC-10. Prior to this, he had accumulated 1,903 hours on the Boeing 727. With such an experienced flight crew at the helm, what kind of trouble could possibly arise that they couldn't solve? At 2:09 p.m., after receiving clearance for takeoff, accompanied by the roar of the engines, United Airlines Flight 232 departed from Stapleton International Airport. As usual, while the plane was climbing, the captain gave a brief report to the tower. Before long, the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. 3:16 p.m. The sky was clear. The passengers had just finished their meals during the smooth flight. Some were preparing to take a short nap to recharge, while some of the children who had just eaten were still excited. In their young voices, they discussed topics that interested them. Suddenly, a loud explosion shattered the quiet afternoon. Passengers cried out in alarm and began looking around, all wanting to know what had happened. After the loud bang, the plane began to shake violently. In the cockpit, the crew immediately began checking the aircraft. First Officer Records disconnected the autopilot and took manual control. Captain Haynes, looking at the violently shaking instrument panel, finally saw the problem. The aircraft's vertical tail-mounted number 2 engine had failed. 3:17 p.m. The captain shut down the number 2 engine and asked the flight engineer to run the checklist for the failed engine. As the number 2 engine shut down, the plane stopped shaking violently. At this moment, the first officer suddenly shouted, "I can't control the plane." The aircraft began to lose altitude, and the fuselage gradually banked to the right. When Captain Haynes heard this, he immediately said he would take the controls. He turned the control column hard left, but was still unable to stop the plane from banking right. If they couldn't level the aircraft quickly, the fuselage would soon roll over and enter an uncontrollable situation, eventually crashing. Just as Captain Haynes realized that this might be more than just a simple number 2 engine failure, the flight engineer suddenly shouted, "The fluid pressure and quantity in all 3 of the aircraft's hydraulic systems are at 0. Hearing this, both the captain and first officers' blood ran cold. They couldn't even believe what they were hearing. The hydraulic system is the lifeblood of an aircraft. It transmits the pilot's commands from the control column to the aircraft's control surfaces, such as the elevators, rudder, and ailerons. If the hydraulic system fails, the control column becomes useless. The pilots can no longer control the aircraft via the column, such as making the plane climb or descend, or turn left and right. Usually, to prevent such an emergency, aircraft are equipped with more than one hydraulic system. For example, this DC-10 is equipped with 3 independent hydraulic systems. Any single one of them could maintain normal flight. But now, all 3 had failed. It was simply unimaginable. The only things they could control now were the left and right engine throttles. At 3:18 p.m., just as the fuselage was about to roll into an inverted position, Captain Haynes made a quick decision. He reduced the left engine to idle and increased thrust on the right engine. This maneuver quickly took effect. The aircraft slowly returned to a level flight. But another problem immediately arose. The plane could only turn right. They were already off course. They definitely couldn't reach their intended destination. Landing as soon as possible became the top priority. 3:20 p.m. The flight engineer radioed the Minneapolis Air Route Traffic Control Center, requesting immediate assistance, hoping to find a solution, and he guided to the nearest airport for an emergency landing. Ground maintenance personnel stated that the 3 hydraulic systems on the DC-10 almost never fail simultaneously, so no emergency procedure had been established for it. Therefore, they couldn't provide any effective help for controlling the aircraft. The air traffic controller, based on the plane's position, suggested they could land at Des Moines International Airport in Iowa. At 3:22 p.m., the controller offered another suggestion. They could make an emergency landing at Sioux Gateway Airport, also in Iowa. After receiving confirmation from the crew, United Airlines Flight 232 was immediately vectored towards Sioux Gateway Airport. But as the crew tried to guide the plane towards Sioux City, something terrifying happened. The aircraft began to fugoid. One moment it would climb, the next it would dive. This oscillating motion typically occurs after hydraulic system failure, when the aircraft's control surfaces become ineffective. During this oscillation, the plane lost about 500 feet of altitude, and it was continuing to descend. The captain and first officer worked together, using the 2 remaining engines to exert limited control over the crippled aircraft, trying their best to keep it flying level. 3:26 p.m. The captain asked a senior flight attendant to come to the cockpit to prepare the cabin for an emergency landing. A moment later, the flight attendant returned to the cockpit and informed the crew that there was an off-duty United Airlines pilot on board who was also a DC-10 flight instructor, and he wanted to come to the cockpit to offer assistance. This man was Denny Edward Fitch, 46 years old, with 23,000 hours of flight experience, 287 of which were on the DC-10. Crucially, he had practiced a similar scenario in a flight simulator. At 3:29 p.m., Captain Haynes agreed to let Fitch into the cockpit. Haynes first briefly explained that the plane had lost all flight controls. He then asked Fitch to go to the passenger cabin to check the aircraft's wings to see if the control surfaces were moving when they tried to operate them. After being told there was almost no movement, the captain asked Fitch to take over the throttles, while he and the first officer focused on the aircraft's attitude and took corrective actions. Based on the plane's current condition, if they didn't land soon, the plane would simply slam hard into the ground in 30 minutes. From this diagram, we can see that after the failure, Sioux Gateway Airport was to the aircraft's left. To land at this airport, they needed to make a left turn, but the plane could only turn right. So Captain Haynes decided to use the two engines to force the plane into a series of right-hand turns, just hoping that before the plane hit the ground, they could align with the runway at Sioux City. 3:35 p.m. The pilots visually spotted Sioux Gateway Airport. Under normal procedures, the plane should slow down for the final approach, but because the hydraulic system had failed, the flaps could not be extended. Flaps increase the aircraft's lift, increasing lift during takeoff for acceleration and increasing lift during landing for deceleration. With no flaps, they needed a certain speed to maintain lift. So at this time, their forward speed and descent rate were far higher than the normal speed for a safe landing. Sioux Gateway Airport had offered them runway 31, the longest in the city, at 9,000 feet long. Captain Haynes instructed the first officer to dump some excess fuel and informed the passengers of the situation. While the flight crew in the cockpit was in a tense life-or-death struggle with the uncontrollable aircraft, Sioux Gateway Airport was in a frenzy of activity. When the airport received word that a plane without controls would be making an emergency landing there, they activated their emergency procedures. The airport runways were cleared. Fire trucks and ambulances all rushed to the airport to be on standby. At 3:41 p.m., the Sioux City Air Traffic Controller continuously provided United Flight 232 with the bearing to the airport, the distance, and information on all available landing areas. 3:50 p.m., the senior flight attendant began giving the passengers one last safety briefing. Throughout the cabin, aside from the crying of infants, everyone else listened quietly to the attendant's instructions, making their final preparations. 3:51 p.m., when United Flight 232 was 121 miles from the airport, the controller requested the plane widen its turning radius slightly. The pilots maneuvered the plane into its final right-hand turn, hoping that after this turn, they would be aligned with the landing runway. At this moment, the captain still remembered to remind the controller, "Whatever you do, keep us away from the city." 3:53 p.m., the controller informed the captain that to the east of the airport, there was a 4-lane interstate highway. If the plane couldn't make it to the airport, they could also attempt to land there. A long stretch of the highway had already been blocked off and was ready for use, but the pilots insisted on landing at the airport. 3 hours 58 minutes and 11 seconds p.m. As the plane completed its turn and once again saw Sioux City, the captain expressed his thanks to the controller and instructed the first officer to remind the passengers that the plane was about to land. At the same time, the flight engineer slid his seat back behind the throttles to give Fitch, who was focused on controlling the throttles, room to use them during the landing. 3 hours, 58 minutes, and 59 seconds p.m. The plane was aligned with the runway, but it wasn't aligned with the pre-planned runway 31, but rather the decommissioned runway 22. At this moment, that runway was filled with the fire trucks and ambulances that had come to the rescue. The people waiting on runway 22, upon receiving the news, evacuated rapidly, trying to get clear of the plane's approach path. In an instant, the runway was cleared. The controller relayed the situation to the pilots. 3:59 p.m., the pilots and the controller had their last communication. At the end of the runway, it's just a wide open field. So, sir, the length won't be a problem. Okay? 3:59 p.m. In the final phase of the emergency landing, the cockpit crew used the intercom to tell the passengers in the cabin to assume the brace position and prepare for landing. 4 p.m. Accompanied by the ground proximity warning system, the plane's nose suddenly dropped, and the right wing dipped. Fitch, controlling the throttles, realized what was happening and tried to level the plane at the last second. However, it was useless. All they could do was brace for impact. 4 p.m. The aircraft slammed down hard on runway 22, slightly to the left of the center line, touching down. The right wingtip struck the ground first. The immense impact tore the right wing off. Fuel immediately ignited. The aircraft's tail section snapped off and separated. The main fuselage skidded rapidly to the right of runway 22. As it skidded, the fuselage tumbled several times. The cockpit section dug into the dirt and broke off. The remaining middle cabin section, along with the left wing, continued to slide forward. Finally, it came to rest in a cornfield near the runway. Captain Haynes later recalled that in the 20 seconds before landing, their forward speed was 215 knots. and their descent rate was 1,620 feet per minute. The range for a safe landing is 140 knots and 300 feet per minute. The ambulances and fire trucks waiting nearby, seeing the plane slam heavily onto the ground, rushed quickly towards the wreckage, which was belching thick black smoke, to begin the rescue. Of the 296 people on board, 185 survived. Among them, 47 were seriously injured, 125 had minor injuries, and 13 were unharmed. Among the survivors, most were seated in the front of the aircraft, and the 4 crew members who had fought to control the plane were also among the survivors. They were found and rescued 35 minutes after the crash. Of the 52 children on board, 11 unfortunately perished. Shortly after the crash, 1 critically injured passenger died from their injuries after rescue efforts failed. Ultimately, the air disaster resulted in 2 fatalities, because the people on the ground had long known this plane would be making an emergency landing at Sioux City. Many local television camera operators were already waiting near the airport, ready to film the plane's landing. Therefore, this accident also became one of the most well-documented air disasters in aviation history. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, dispatched an air crash investigation team to the accident site to investigate. What was known so far was that 44 minutes before the crash, the plane's number 2 engine failed, and then all 3 hydraulic systems mysteriously failed, leaving the plane uncontrollable. Was there any connection between these 2 events? According to the investigation team, several important clues were quickly found. Based on information provided by a farmer, the team found a piece of the aircraft's tail wreckage 90 kilometers, approx 56 miles, from the crash site. In this piece of wreckage, they found parts from the plane's number 2 hydraulic system. By analyzing the plane's flight path, they calculated the time the wreckage fell from the plane was 3:16 p.m. And this time was exactly the same time the number 2 engine failed. At this point, the investigators had countless theories they were eager to verify. By carefully examining the aircraft wreckage found at the accident site, after checking every hydraulic line, they discovered that the puncture points on all 3 hydraulic system lines were concentrated near the failed number 2 engine. In the black box flight data, there was no indication of any abnormality in the 3 engines before the incident. But in reality, the number 2 engine had indeed failed. When the investigation team reconstructed the failed engine, they found the engine casing was full of holes. These holes were caused by some object puncturing it from the inside out. And in the holes, they found traces of titanium, known as space metal, because it is lightweight, high strength, and has stable chemical properties, such as resistance to high temperatures, low temperatures, and corrosion. Titanium alloy is often used to manufacture aircraft and various spacecraft, so where did this titanium come from? With this question, the investigation team soon discovered that the failed engine was missing a massive 370-pound component. This component is responsible for drawing air into the engine, the fan disc, because it must withstand the enormous centrifugal force of the attached fan blades. It is generally made of titanium alloy. Now the entire fan disc was gone. To find it, the engine manufacturer even offered a high reward. Finally, 3 months after the incident, it was found by a farmer in his cornfield. When the fan disc was found, it was split into 2 large pieces. Such a strong titanium alloy would not normally fracture like this. Technicians conducted a detailed inspection of the fractured fan disc. As a result, among the countless cracks, they found traces of metal fatigue. Metal fatigue is a type of permanent damage with no obvious signs to detect, and the destruction it causes is often sudden. Therefore, investigators speculated that the loud bang the passengers heard was the fan disc shattering due to metal fatigue. The metal fragments generated by the explosion punctured many parts of the aircraft's tail, including the nearby horizontal stabilizer and all 3 hydraulic lines. This is why, after the loud bang, the pilots completely lost control of the aircraft. Why would such a strong titanium component experience metal fatigue? Through further detailed inspection, technicians in the metal fatigue area found nitrogen and oxygen which shouldn't have been there. They can form tiny voids in the titanium alloy. After years of use, this leads to metal fatigue problems. Normally, to prevent other gases from the titanium, factories use a double vacuum smelting process when producing titanium alloy. This is currently the most typical and mature process in the world for smelting high-end metal materials. The resulting titanium alloy must also undergo ultrasonic testing. If it doesn't pass, it is remelted. So it's highly likely that the fan disc on this aircraft was made from titanium that had a metallurgical defect from the start. Investigators also found a fluorescent penetrant material on the crack surface. This material is used to check for cracks during maintenance. This means that during previous maintenance on the fan disc, the crack already existed, but the inspectors failed to detect it. After a thorough investigation, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board finally issued its investigation report on the air crash. The report stated the probable cause of this accident was that United Airlines engine overhaul facilities, inspection, and quality control procedures did not adequately account for the limitations of human factors, leading to a failure to detect a fatigue crack. This crack was located in a critical area of the fan disc, originating from a previously undetected metallurgical defect. The fan disc on this DC-10's failed engine had been in use for 18 years. Every time the engine started and reached operating temperature, the crack would grow a little bit. And this flight was the straw that broke the camel's back. The small crack became a large fracture, ultimately causing the fan disc to explode and destroy the hydraulic systems. However, due to the engine company's and its suppliers' production records having severe irregularities and gaps, it was impossible to trace the source of the material used to make the fan disc. At the same time, the NTSB also recreated the accident in a flight simulator. In simulated flights with the same problems as United Flight 232, many experienced pilots crashed before even reaching the ground. Therefore, the NTSB stated that under these circumstances, a safe landing was virtually impossible. Thus, the performance of the flight crew on this flight was far beyond reasonable expectations and worthy of praise. Therefore, even though the emergency landing of United Flight 232 resulted in the plane's disintegration and 112 deaths, the flight crew still received high praise from the public. Captain Haynes was also called a hero, but the captain himself believed that the large number of survivors in the Sioux City crash was due to 5 factors: luck, communication, preparation, execution, and cooperation. For example, the good luck was that the accident occurred while the plane was passing over the state of Iowa, a relatively flat land, and it was a clear day with good weather. The landing also coincided with a hospital shift change, so medical staff arrived quickly. Also, Sioux Gateway Airport was a joint military-civilian airport. Besides providing commercial and general aviation services, it was also the base for the Iowa Air National Guard and the Air Mobility Command's 185th Air Refueling Wing. On the day of the accident, there happened to be 285 Air National Guard personnel on duty at the airport, so they could assist in evacuating ground personnel and transporting the injured from the plane. Good communication meant that after the accident, air traffic control responded quickly, and communication between departments was very smooth. And the crew members, while performing their respective duties, communicated seamlessly, which allowed them to calmly face the difficulties before them. So Captain Haynes believed the credit belonged to everyone. He personally refused to be called a hero. He also believed that the flight attendants worked during this incident did not receive enough praise. Later, the captain became a public speaker on aviation safety. Interestingly, in 2003, he participated as a speaker in an aviation safety seminar held in Brussels, Belgium. At the conference, he shared experiences on how to save a plane after losing all hydraulics. Coincidentally, a captain who attended the seminar a few months later encountered a situation of total hydraulic failure. That captain ultimately managed to land successfully by controlling the engine throttles, becoming the first ever large commercial airliner to lose all hydraulic control and still land safely. That captain was the DHL Baghdad incident captain, Eric Genote. As for the DHL Baghdad incident, we'll save that for next time. After this accident, newer aircraft designs incorporated hydraulic fuses. If a hydraulic line is punctured again, it can prevent the loss of all hydraulic fluid. This way, even if all 3 hydraulic systems are damaged in the tail, it at least ensures the pilots have some hydraulic fluid left to use. On May 7, 2012, important figure in the Sioux City crash, pilot Dennis Fitch died of brain cancer at the age of 69 on August 25, 2019. Captain Haynes, 6 days short of his 88th birthday, also passed away from illness. After his death, United Airlines released another statement thanking him for his extraordinary contributions on United Flight 232. This air crash, like the Miracle on the Hudson, is a classic example of a flight crew averting disaster. Although this landing was not successful, and the death toll was 112, it's important to know that before this, no commercial airliner had ever successfully landed with a total loss of hydraulics. Even the emergency responders waiting on the ground believed this emergency landing would likely have no survivors. Saving more than half the people on board was beyond everyone's expectations. Without doubt, they had already created a miracle. Alright, that's the story of the Sioux City air crash. If you enjoyed my video, you can like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next update. We'll see you next time.